The heart monitor beeped in a steady, mocking rhythm as Grace Monroe lay in a hospital bed with a gash across her forehead, unaware that the man smiling down at her, the man gently brushing his fingers near her lips, was not there to comfort her. He was there to make sure she never spoke again. Just 6 hours earlier, Grace had been driving home from her night shift at Riverbend County Medical Center in Asheville, North Carolina, when she witnessed something she was never supposed to see: 2 police cruisers parked behind an abandoned warehouse, trunks open, duffel bags changing hands under moonlight. She had slowed her car out of instinct, the same instinct that once kept her alive on deployment, and in that half-second of hesitation, one of the officers had looked up and locked eyes with her through the windshield. She sped away, heart hammering, but not fast enough. Minutes later, her car was run off the road. When she woke up, she was in a hospital bed, stitched and sedated, with no memory of how she got there, only a gnawing certainty that something was terribly wrong. If you believe people deserve a chance to fight for the truth, and that kindness and courage still matter in a broken world, hit like on this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs a reminder that heroes still exist, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Grace Monroe was not always a nurse who flinched at strange noises in parking lots. Before Riverbend, before the scrubs and the 12-hour shifts, she had spent 6 years as a Navy hospital corpsman, deployed twice to combat zones where she learned to stitch wounds under gunfire and read danger in the smallest details: a shift in someone's breathing, the way a hand hovered too close to a hip. She had left the Navy with a Bronze Star she never talked about and a quiet resolve to spend the rest of her life healing people instead of patching up the wounded on a battlefield. She thought that chapter of her life was closed. She was wrong. The officer standing over her bed introduced himself as Sergeant Wade Kessler, and his voice was warm, almost fatherly, laced with the kind of concern that made hospital rooms feel safe. He told her she had been in a car accident, that she was lucky to be alive, that he just wanted to ask her a few questions about what she remembered from the night before. But Grace noticed things civilians would have missed. She noticed how his eyes flicked to the door every few seconds, how his thumb brushed against his duty belt near his sidearm, how his questions circled the same narrow window of time again and again, gently probing to see exactly how much she remembered. She noticed the fresh scratch on his forearm, still red and unhealed, in the exact shape a car door handle would leave if someone had grabbed it in a struggle. Her pulse spiked, but years of training had taught her to keep her face soft and her voice slow. She told him she remembered nothing after leaving work, that everything past the parking lot was a blur. He smiled, patted her hand, and told her to rest. But as he turned to leave, she saw him nod almost imperceptibly to a second man standing just outside her door, a man in plain clothes she hadn't noticed before, and something in her chest went cold with certainty. They were not finished with her. That night, alone in the dim hospital room with only the hum of machines for company, Grace made a decision that would change everything. She was not going to wait to become a statistic in someone else's cover-up. She had survived worse than this. She had survived firefights in places most Americans couldn't find on a map, and she was not going to let a corrupt cop with a badge and a grudge finish what the car crash started. Quietly, she began working the 4 needle from her arm, wincing at the sting, and swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her balance on legs that still trembled from the concussion. Every part of her body screamed to stay still, to trust the system, to believe that hospitals were sanctuaries where nothing bad could happen. But her training whispered louder than her fear: trust your instincts, assess your exits, and never, ever wait for the enemy to make the first move. She found her personal cell phone tucked in a bag of belongings the paramedics had brought in with her, miraculously still charged, and with shaking fingers she began recording a voice memo, describing everything she had seen at the warehouse in careful, clinical detail, the way she once documented casualties in the field, unemotional and precise, because she knew that if something happened to her, the truth needed to survive even if she didn't. Then she did something that surprised even herself. Instead of running, she went looking for evidence. She had spent her military career learning that the best defense was often a controlled offense, so she quietly slipped out of her room and made her way toward the hospital's security office, moving through the hallway like she'd once moved through hostile terrain, back close to the wall, eyes scanning every doorway, breathing measured and slow. She found the night security guard, a kind older man named Walter Higgins who had worked at Riverbend for over 20 years, and she told him, calmly but urgently, that she needed access to the parking lot camera footage from the previous night, that her life depended on it. Walter, sensing the fear beneath her composure, didn't ask too many questions. He pulled up the footage, and there it was, her car slowing near the warehouse, the two cruisers, and unmistakably, Sergeant Wade Kessler's face illuminated by a duffel bag's contents spilling under a flashlight beam, stacks of cash and small vials that had no business being handled by police officers in an abandoned lot at midnight. It was the proof she needed, the proof that turned her from a victim into a witness the department could not afford to silence quietly. But Kessler was already moving. Grace's absence from her room had triggered a call from a nurse on duty, and within minutes, Kessler and his plainclothes associate were sweeping the hallways, their footsteps echoing with a false urgency that masked their true intent. Grace, hidden in the security office with Walter, watched the black and white monitors as the two men split up to search different wings of the hospital, and she understood with sharpening clarity that this was no longer about protecting herself. This was about protecting every patient and every nurse who might become collateral damage if these men were desperate enough to silence her inside a building full of innocent people. She made the hardest call of her life, dialing not 911, which she suspected Kessler could intercept or delay through department channels, but the direct cell number of a former Navy colleague, Anthony Reyes, who now worked as a special agent with the FBI's regional field office. Anthony had once owed Grace his life after she kept him breathing for 11 minutes on a helicopter evacuation, and he answered on the second ring. In a voice stripped of panic and full of the steady authority that had once commanded respect in combat zones, Grace relayed everything: the warehouse, the footage, Kessler's name, and her exact location. Anthony told her federal agents were already investigating irregularities within the county's narcotics division and that her evidence might be the final piece needed to bring the entire operation down. He told her to hide, to stay quiet, and to trust that help was coming. What happened next tested every ounce of composure Grace had left. Kessler found the security office door locked and began pounding on it, his friendly hospital room persona completely gone, replaced by a low, threatening voice demanding she open up before things got difficult for everyone involved. Grace, positioned behind Walter with a fire extinguisher gripped tightly in her hands as her only available weapon, felt the old battlefield calm settle over her, the same calm that had once let her work through chaos without losing herself in it. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply waited, counting seconds, listening to Kessler's breathing change through the door, and trusting that the woman who had once saved lives under enemy fire could survive one more night against a man hiding behind a badge. The FBI arrived 11 minutes later, sirens deliberately silent until the last possible moment, agents moving through the hospital with a precision that mirrored the discipline Grace herself had once been part of. Kessler was arrested in the hallway outside the security office, his protests of innocence dissolving the moment agents recovered the duffel bags from his cruiser's trunk, filled with stolen pharmaceutical narcotics diverted from hospital supply chains across 3 counties, a scheme that had been running for over a year, protected by a badge that was supposed to represent safety instead of exploiting it. Grace's testimony, backed by the security footage and her own meticulous recorded account, became the cornerstone of a case that ultimately exposed 6 officers and 2 hospital administrators involved in the trafficking ring, a scandal that made national headlines and led to sweeping reforms in how the state monitored controlled substances within its healthcare facilities. In the months that followed, Grace Monroe did not seek fame or attention. She returned to her scrubs and her night shifts, choosing quietly to keep healing the people who came through Riverbend's doors, though now with a security detail nearby for several weeks until the danger fully passed. She received a formal commendation from the FBI and a personal letter of gratitude from the hospital board, but what mattered most to her, she later said in a brief interview, was that no other nurse would ever again face what she had faced alone in that room. She had spent years learning to save lives on foreign battlefields, never imagining that the skills which once protected soldiers overseas would one day protect herself and countless future patients from a threat hiding in plain sight, wearing the very uniform meant to keep people safe. Before we close this story, we would love for you to leave a comment below sharing one word that describes how this story made you feel, whether it's inspired, moved, grateful, or something entirely your own, because your comments mean the world to this channel and help these stories reach more people who need them. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that courage can live quietly inside ordinary people until the moment they're called to rise, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe so you can join us for the next story of resilience, justice, and the quiet heroes who walk among us every single day.